Okay, so I'll begin. So now just a disclaimer before I start. The title is a slight exaggeration, but yeah, I felt it was kind of a good hook to get people interested. But I suppose possibly for those involved in the incident, maybe they did see it in those terms. So it's going to be about a bit about my own family background, and also a bit about mainly about clashes between the IRA and blue shirts in the 1930s in North Cork. So if you haven't heard of Baker's Bridge, and to be honest I wasn't even sure where it was myself until recently. So Baker's Bridge is located in Araglen. If you're not entirely sure where Araglen is, right on the border between Cork, Tipperary and Waterford. So it's not exactly a parish, and there are several townlands. So it's kind of spread across several different parishes and counties, and it's I suppose kind of named after the Araglen River which passes through it. So Baker's Bridge was considered to be kind of right on the border between Kilworth and Araglen. So I suppose who are the groups that we're talking about. So I suppose I don't really need to go into any explanation as to who the IRA were. We all know the Irish Republican Army, founded in the aftermath of 1916. After the treaty in 1921, the organisation split. One group became the Free State Army. The others who opposed the treaty continued on as the IRA. Now the blue shirts were actually formed kind of as a consequence of the IRA. Originally, when they were formed in 1932, they were known as the Army Comrades Association. A lot of the members were ex-Free State Army members, and their main role was to act as security for Cumann na Gael political gatherings and other affiliated political groups, many of whom eventually came together to become Fine Gael later on in the 1930s. But what had happened was that after the Civil War, the IRA had been declared legal, and in the late 1920s, a lot of their members had been interned. But when Fianna Fáil came to power in 1932, as part of their manifesto, and because of course they gained a lot of their support from the anti-treaty elements, they reversed a lot of that. So the newly resurgent IRA felt that they wanted some payback on Cumann na Gael for locking them up, and also as a way of continuing on some of the grudges and grievances left over from the Civil War. Now, Ono Duffy, who was a former Garda Commissioner until he fell out with De Valera, became leader of the Blue Shirts in July 1933. They'd already acquired the distinctive blue uniform, which is where they got the name from. But O'Duffy introduced a lot more elements of fascism, such as the straight arm salute, and there's still a lot of debate among historians as to whether the Blue Shirts can be considered a fascist organisation, or whether the rank and file members really cared all that much, for political ideologies. But of course, we all know the blue shirt name has continued on with Fine Gael. Now here you can see Ono Duffy at a gathering. I think this was in Lismore, according to the photo. So again, you can't, unfortunately, since it's black and white, you can't make out the colour of the shirts, but you can certainly see the distinctive uniforms and the straight arm salutes. Now, it's very hard to actually find photos of IRA members from this period, because again, they didn't wear uniforms. Part of their, because uniforms would have made it easier to I suppose, to find and arrest them. Now, Araglen had a very long tradition of Republican activity. And in fact, if you look through the Bureau of Military History witness statements from 1916 War of Independence, you will see a lot of the same names, or at least a lot of the same families involved with the IRA into the 1930s. So this was something that it continued on. There was a strong tradition of it there, and in some respects it still continues. If you're ever at a gathering in Araglen, once the drink starts to flow, there won't be long until someone puts on the Wolf Tones or some other similar musician. So the Araglen unit of the IRA was commanded by Liam Leddy of Gorsnasketty, and during the War of Independence, there was Cornelius Leddy, who I believe was quite probably an uncle of his, who commanded. So again, you have that family tradition. Joseph Beery of Coolmoohan was the quartermaster and second in command. He's an individual who will be going into a lot of kind of discussing in detail, because he had several run-ins with the guards, so a lot more information was recorded on him. Other notable members in the area included Patrick Hyland, Patrick Moore, David White, James Lomasney and William Clancy. And again, another disclaimer just to get it out there. Patrick Hyland was my grandfather, which was how I became interested in researching this. Now, of course, he never spoke about any of this while he was alive, because that was just how his generation were, and it's just I've been piecing together bits and pieces of the story over the years. Now, here you see Liam Leddy addressing a crowd at a commemoration in the 1950s. As you see, the image came from Waterford Museum. I had sent off to them for the original, but it hadn't arrived by the time I left this morning, so I said to proceed with this to stand in. I was looking through it, hoping I'd spot my grandfather in the crowd, but I'm sure he was there somewhere. Now, the encounter at Baker's Bridge was just one in kind of a series of clashes between the two groups, and this, of course, this wasn't limited to Cork. There are plenty of other parts of the country where the groups clashed and had run-ins. So there had been a previous disturbance in Kilworth on March 18th, 1934. Several members of the Araglen IRA, numbers kind of vary. Some say, some reports say about a dozen, others say about 16, 17. But a number of them anyway were returning home from a parade at the Pike Field near Fermoy. They stopped off in Kilworth for a few drinks and refreshments at a pub belonging to John Cotter in Kilworth, and they stayed there for a few hours, and they left the pub for home at about 5 to 7. And of course, while going through the village, they ran into some local blue shirts led by an Ignatius Fenton. Now, after a bit of a scrap, in which case fists were thrown and anything else they could grab was flung at one another, the blue shirts retreated to Ignatius Fenton's house. Now, the men from Araglen chased after them, but of course I suppose they didn't see exactly where they went into, so they went after the neighbouring pub which belonged to Thomas Fenton. Now, this was, according to the Gardaí, this was assumed to have been a case of mistaken identity. Because, Thomas Fenton was a distant relation of Ignatius, likely saw the Fenton name above the door and went straight for it. So they forced open the front door and smashed the inner door with glass panels. A revolver shot was also fired into the air, but it's not, they weren't able to determine exactly who fired the revolver, whether it was the IRA lads or the blue shirts. There weren't that many firearms in circulation at the time, but there were still a few revolvers left over from the War of Independence and Civil War. So not long afterwards, Garda Sergeant John Meehan and fellow Gardaí William Meehan and Patrick Farron spotted the group. Both were unaware of what had actually happened because the IRA lads were just on the way home. But of course, one of the IRA lads, being a bit cheeky, felt like calling out to the Gardaí and asking them, why don't ye harass the blue shirts like ye harass us? And of course, the Gardaí, he didn't know exactly who it was at the time, but it didn't take them long to get a name and to, once they'd learned what happened, they of course, tracked down the lads from Araglen and interviewed them, and of course they denied any knowledge of what happened. They swore up and down they were nowhere near Kilworth at the time, that one fella had a black eye and a bandage around his head, and when the Garda asked him, well, what happened? Oh, sure, I have a cold, Garda. I wasn't anywhere near Kilworth, I swear, so the guards had to leave it because the IRA offered to pay compensation to the pub owners, and they said, we'll leave it at that. They didn't want to be drawing any further trouble on themselves. The guards knew full well who'd been involved, but as is often the case with these sort of incidents, they couldn't prove anything, and it was felt, it was safer just to let the matter go. So later on then, on the 26th of June 1934, a local election was held, and the polling station for the Araglen Kilworth area was located at the cottage of Mary Moher at Baker's Bridge. She's referred to in the report as the widow Moher. This is, of course, that's what everyone probably would have known her as at the time. And the TD for Kilworth, Patrick Daly, was in attendance because, of course, this was before they scrapped the dual mandates. When a lot of TDs were also acting as local councillors too. Now, I actually came across an interesting thing, kind of a small aside about Patrick Daly. Have any of you ever heard of the legal term personation? Yeah. So Patrick Daly was actually charged with personation for a separate matter. On the same day, apparently he'd been, there were claims that he'd been, slipped, a few quid to influence his vote, and another issue. So of course, it's, Patrick Daly was the Fine Gael TD, so of course the blue shirts were present to act as some protection for him. At the time they were just kind of, lounging about, taking it easy, taking shelter from the rain. And another interesting thing noted in the report was that the returning officer was a retired RIC man who was present there with his son. Now, things kind of kicked off at about 9 p.m. when a company of IRA came around the corner, marching in formation and led by Joseph Beery. So no immediate action was taken by the two sides. There was a bit of kind of, scurrying up to each other, eyeballing, kind of, waiting to see who'd make the first move. Next year, the blue shirts, began singing, Aaron Levine, the soldier song. Now afterwards, I suppose, trying to provoke the IRA lads into some sort of action. Yeah. So the the Gardaí approached John Joyce, leader of the Kilworth Blue Shirts, and asked his men to stop singing, and would they kindly move, mind just moving on, heading for home. The polling station was closing up. There was no need for them to hang around. So here we can see kind of excerpt from the report. So for instance, the Blue Shirts congregation near the lorry and started singing the soldier song. John Joyce, vice captain of the Kilworth Company, was immediately approached by Sergeant Michael J. Gorman. Araglen asked Joyce to get the Blue Shirts to stop singing. The singing and stopped. DC James Hockler approached Joseph Berry, who was in charge of the IRA, and requested him to use his endeavours to keep the peace. Berry replied, "You can mind your own bloody business and I'll mind mine." He was then addressed in the same strain by Patrick G. Brady, and was told that the Blue Shirts were being moved away by the Gardaí as quietly and as quickly as possible. Berry replied, "If any bloody man here wants fight, he is going to get plenty of it. We are a crowd of our own in Araglen, and we won't have these bastards." So again, very strong language for the period, and so I suppose those were fighting words. So here you can actually see a list of those who were identified as being in the area. I think there were others who were with the IRA who kind of who weren't identified, probably because they were kind of keeping to the back, maybe keeping their heads down. But as I said, you can see a lot of family names, and when it comes to the area, comparing them with the witness reports from the War of Independence, seeing the same families passing on that legacy of involvement with the IRA. And so you can see Patrick Hyland Barnahound there, and his brother James as well. So certainly a very, very good crowd. Now Liam Leddy arrived soon afterwards. Gardaí began moving the Blue Shirts to the lorry. Liam Leddy had a reputation as being a much cooler head than his second in command. He just, when he arrived, he didn't, even see anything. He just kind of marked the distance between the IRA and the Blue Shirts by walking up and down, and kind of just tried to keep things calm. But eventually, unfortunately, the IRA lads lost patience and began to move towards the lorry and the polling station. Obviously, eager for a fight. Liam Leddy helped get the returning officer and the ballots and everything to his car, helped him get clear. Didn't want him, caught in the middle of this scrap. So, even though the Blue Shirts were loaded onto their lorry, the lads began, exchanging insults and chucking stones at each other. A revolver was also fired off by the area, and there were reports of rifle fire from the Coolmoohan area. But when the Gardaí searched the area the following day, they weren't able to find anything. Aside from a few scrapes and bruises, there were no serious injuries on either side. And the Blue Shirts eventually left for Kilworth. The Gardaí, despite the disturbance, the Gardaí said it just wasn't worth making arrests. They passed it up the chain of command, but the local Gardaí had recommended this. It wasn't worth the trouble that would be caused. That if they went around and started rounding up the IRA lads for this, it would just kind of stir things up even more. And it's the fact that the Blue Shirts brought it on themselves by provoking the IRA by coming onto their patch, onto their turf. So you can see kind of a lot of regional rivalries at play as well. So Gardaí just it wasn't worth the headaches. Now they did search the houses of a lot of those involved, just on the chance of turning up some of the weapons used, but they didn't find find anything. Now, in 1935, the Fianna Fáil government said that it had enough with the IRA, that they were pushing things a bit too much. There was a raid on an armoury in Dublin. A lot of weaponry went missing, and some of it later turned up across the border up north. So Fianna Fáil said, look, enough was enough, and they declared the IRA to be an illegal organisation. The blue shirts were also declared illegal, but at that point it didn't really matter, because after Ono Duffy took a bulk of them off to the Spanish Civil War and that kind of disaster, they were starting to fade away anyway, and they were absorbed into Fine Gael. So in 1936, a number of men from Araglen, including Liam Leahy and Joseph Beery, were among a number of Cork IRA members who were arrested under a number of charges. These included, membership of legal organisation, conspiring to acquire weapons, and failing to give the Gardaí an account of their whereabouts. But by the end of it, they're both before sitting at the Special Criminal Court. But the only charge that they could get them with was failing to give an account of their movements to the Gardaí, and they were jailed for 3 months. So again, it was the same back then as it is nowadays. I think I know of only one successful prosecution for IRA membership. Most of the time, they get them on some smaller charges. It was always very difficult to prove that someone was a member of the organisation. Now, I don't know if failing to give an account, of movements of the Gardaí is still considered a crime, but I'm sure the tone of most of them didn't help. So after 3 months, they were back home again. But when World War II broke out and Ireland declared its neutrality, some of the IRA started a bombing campaign in Britain, and the government, the Irish government, was concerned that, given that things were already tense between themselves and Churchill's government, that this could be used as a pretext to invade and retake the treaty port. So a number of men of the IRA from Araglen were rounded up and arrested in 1940. Among them were Thomas Hyland, Joseph Beery and Liam Leahy. Now, these initially were not interned. They were arrested under Offences Against the State Act. Thomas Hyland was the older brother to my grandfather. He was arrested because himself and a few others were caught with a stash of guns. Nothing major, just a few, I think, a revolver or two and maybe a rifle that was found on a farm when the Gardaí searched it. So, even in the report, the Gardaí stressed that Thomas Hyland wasn't a known troublemaker, that kind of felt that it would have been wrong place, wrong time for him, but the law was the law. And of course, Joseph Beery, Liam Leahy, well, they were already, of course, well known to the Gardaí. Initially, those arrested were sent to Arbor Hill, and again, they could only charge Joseph Beery and Liam Leahy with relatively minor crimes and keep them for a few months. So what happened with Joseph Beery was that he was sent to Arbor Hill for 3 months, and as soon as that sentence was up, he was rearrested and shipped off to the Curragh. And I believe something similar happened with Liam Leahy, which of course seems, looking back, seems a bit unfair, because if you're put before a judge and you're told, right, you're going away for 3 months, suddenly expect when you get out to be picked up again and sent off indefinitely. Now, also, of course, interned from Araglen were Patrick Moore, David White, and my grandfather, Patrick Hyland. Himself and his brother Thomas, initially the plan was for them to stay kept there for kind of semi-indefinitely until the war was over, until they were felt to no longer be be a danger. Thomas Hyland was paroled briefly on compassionate leave in 1942 because his father had died. My grandfather was meant to be, because they actually, they'd written to, the family had written to the authorities asking, could he be temporarily released? But, due to his health, they felt that it just, wasn't safe to move him. And the story goes is that, once Thomas Hyland was going to be allowed out on temporary release, and once the funeral and all that was out of the way with, he promptly hopped on a boat to Australia and settled down there. Now there's no mention of that in the file, so it's possible I know he did end up in Australia, but I don't know exactly when. But it's possible that if he did decide to abscond, the Gardaí decided just wasn't worth sending off to Australia to try and get him back. Now here you have some of the the files on Joseph Beery. So you can see the internment order there on the far side, and then a report from the Gardaí. Now, interestingly enough, there was actually the local Fianna Fáil Command made representations on behalf of Joseph Beery's family to try and have him released. And basically, the justification that the Fianna Fáil Command gave was that, well, look, his family, they all turned out to vote for us in the last election. They're all Fianna Fáil supporters, so we should try and, we made these promises when they voted for us. We should try and follow through on this. So here you can actually see kind of a fuller report on from them on Joseph Beery. Part of it has been redacted, and I'm not entirely sure why. I think this is possibly done. I think possibly maybe something to do with Northern Ireland, or wherever he was attempting to, where Joseph Beery was attempting to get weapons from. But you can still get a fairly clear picture of it. And basically, the Gardaí felt that he was just too dangerous to be released. That after Liam Leddy was let out, he settled down. He started teaching Irish in the area, and having a few other, I think lots of Irish dancing and stuff like that as well. Whereas they felt that if Joseph Beery was let out, he'd just go right back to doing what he'd been doing before, and he just stir up far too much trouble in the area when things were finally starting to go quiet again. Now, the conditions in the Curragh weren't particularly pleasant. This was an internment camp that had been around since at least the 1920s, and just the facilities hadn't been upgraded in that time. At one point, a cut to the butter ration by about a third led to a riot among the internees, and was only when the guards had to go get their guns and actually opened fire on the crowd, killing one internee and seriously wounding another, that the riot dispersed. And it tells you a lot about how few luxuries they had in there, that something as basic as cutting their butter ration sent them into a riot. So my grandfather, Patrick Hyland, he'd already been, I think he'd already had an underlying chest issue before he went in. According to his report on the internment, it was something like asthmatic pneumonia. So he spent nearly his entire time in there in the camp infirmary, which was why they didn't feel comfortable releasing him for his father's funeral, because they just thought it would be too dangerous to move him, that he was too ill. And I know that in later life, he was always, always suffering from chest infections and pneumonia and things like that. So his time in the camp really took its toll on his health. But it was also a chance for some of them to improve their education, and they set up Gael tucks within the camp so as the internees could learn Irish. Others from around the country, they said they pooled their expertise and also turned it kind of into a school for the internees, because a lot of these lads would have been farmer sons. They might not have had access to much in the way of education, so at least through this they're able to learn some skills. Now, once World War II ended, they were all let out of the camp. Although apparently it took a long time for some of them to readjust to normal society. According to interviews that were conducted with some of them, the changes just in society time, even in those few years, were quite drastic. And for some of them, after being cooped up for so long, they found open spaces to be terrifying. They were afraid of crossing the road, even minor stuff like that. So that's what next thing to talk about is where did I get all this information? All of this came from Department of Justice files in the National Archives. These files were transferred across in 2012, and I only became aware of them because one of my mother's cousins from Australia, I suppose he'd heard a lot more about it from his father. He came back to Ireland and he mentioned, by the way, I was up in the National Archives, and he said to me, I found some information on our fathers. So when I had the opportunity, I went up there myself and started looking through these files. Initially, to find them, I ended up having to just search by locality, and that actually brought up a lot of the files and the information. The file on Joseph Beery actually contained the most detailed account of what was going on during the period, because he had so many run-ins with Gardaí. As you can see from the excerpt, from the way he talked to the guards, he certainly considered himself to be a tough man. And when he was arrested, actually, it was one single guard actually managed to, guard was out cycling at night, and he came across a group of lads coming out of the local creamery. And of course, straight away he recognised Joseph Beery and some men with him, so he stopped his bike in the middle of the road, and they, of course, they had to stop to get past him. So he knew where Joseph Beery was now, and the next day, they called on him early in the morning and hauled him up. But the creamery in Araglen seems to have been, I suppose, kind of the hub for the IRA, because a lot of them worked in the creamery, and I suppose would have been kind of a handy recruiting ground as well. So I said, all of this is contained in the Department of Justice files. They are divided up into a number of different series. The B series is mainly contained with the blue shirts under the various names they went by, and kind of other similar groups, while the C series is mainly concerned with the IRA. And these, there's quite a lot of stuff in there, and it's fascinating to read through it. So, thank you. So.